Welcome to the Dynasty Dummies podcast. I am hosting again tonight. I am Zach Reed, and I am joined by another one of my favorite analysts and a man I call my friend, a man who is 50% Dynasty day trader, 50% evil genius commissioner, and 50% purveyor of trunk beers, John Bosch at John Bosch FF of Dynasty Wall Street, occasionally Dynasty Game Night, Dynasty Time Machine. He's everywhere. The FF Eliminators. If you have ever heard somebody pull their hair out about a league, John is probably commissioning that league. Welcome, John. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you, Zach. It's been like a week, a little over a week now since we got to see each other in person for the first time. So
I know this is
good.
So beautiful. The FF Expo, the Midwest Expo, that was awesome, and it's gonna just get bigger. Like, that was amazing. I haven't had an experience like that where, and I tweeted out, I said, they say don't meet your heroes because they'll disappoint you, and whoever said that was dead ass wrong. Like, that was awesome.
It really was. It was so much fun. It was great to meet you. Looking forward to meeting you next year at it again, and then hopefully other times in the future too.
Yes.
So
yes.
We got to make getting together more of a priority now that now that we hopefully can again get together. We'll see where things go. We're not going to get into that.
We'll keep our fingers crossed. I just was watching the school board here in Maine debate mask mandates and that sort of thing. So it's we're not out of the woods yet, but at least we're looking promising. So yeah,
we'll move on.
Yeah,
we'll move on.
So it's really funny to have you on because of the things I've been listening to over the past week or two, and I've been listening to a lot of Disney podcasts, and you and I will talk Disney probably at some point in this podcast, but it
plays in heavily to how I play Dynasty. So,
exactly. And the other thing I've been listening to, and this sounds really weird because in your spare time, I don't think a lot of people listen to lectures from Yale, but I've been listening to Yale's Econ 159, which is actually a game theory class.
Oh, that sounds fun.
And it's been fantastic.
Sorry, I didn't just say a class sounds fun. Whatever. That does sound fun.
I know, but that's because I'm always looking for different ways to approach fantasy football, and one of the ways to do that is through game theory. And if you're mathematical, you can take this like so far because there's a lot of math behind game theory. And if you don't know game theory, I mean, I'm sure you've heard me talk. I talked last week about the Monty Hall problem, but game theory is basically the study of how people interact and how that interaction and the choices you make produce outcomes. And so it's, the players playing against each other and making choices. And so you always hear the term optimal or sometimes suboptimal if I'm drafting. And that all comes from game theory. And it comes from the study of making choices that aren't necessarily the best choice, but have the best chance of the best outcome for you. And one of the examples they give, or one of the games they play, is the Prisoner's Dilemma. And I don't know if you've heard this one.
I have not. Let's explain it.
All right. So it's these two prisoners, Zach and John, we'll call them, get arrested. And they're informed individually that if one confesses against the other and testifies against the other, then he'll go free. Okay, so that's one outcome. If he doesn't cooperate and the other does, he gets a 3-year sentence. If both confess, they get 2 years. And if neither confess, they get 1 year. And so rationally, you should confess and testify against the other person because then you would get nothing. But instead of hoping that nobody confesses. So it's this trying to figure out what your opponent is going to do rationally, and then trying to figure out the best recourse that you have. And although this isn't a 1-for-1, to me, I drafted in the Scott Fish Bowl at the turn. So I had the 102, and I came back, and Eric Carabell had the 101. And so I used something similar to this, because you can't assume that Eric Carabell is going to make a mistake. I mean, that's just, he's the ESPN fantasy football guru. And so when it would come back to me making a pick at the turn, game theory says, if there's a player that I want, I need to go get him now, rather than try to get that 2-for-1, and pick the guy that I hope, and hope that somebody falls back to me. And so that's been, like, again, I'm diving way deeper into this than I intended to, because I saw this, I Googled game theory, and I saw this. Oh, well, there's a class at Yale, and they put it online, and so I started getting way, way deeper. But it's something that, I mean, we don't even think about it, but we're processing game theory all the time. Whenever you have an interaction with somebody, even if it's like trying to get your mother-in-law to make your favorite meal, and manipulating and that little repartee back and forth, to fantasy football in your drafts, to trading, because you have to understand. And this is something that I love. You had a tweet, I don't know, it was probably a couple of months ago, but where you talked about things that, you hold true in a trade. And so you're like, look, things that don't change. Value does not, yes. It does not change a player's value. So the players on your roster.
Nope. Doesn't change that the player you want.
Yeah. Other players on your roster that play, the same position, positional groups on your roster that need improvement, and positional groups on my roster that need improvement. None of that changes value for you. And in reality, it doesn't either. But game theory says, not everybody is rational.
It 100% changes values for other people, and I'm aware of that.
and there's another one where there's a game theory problem. It's called guess 2/3 of the average. And so a whole bunch of people are given a number between 1 and 100, and you have to guess what 2/3 of the average of the entire group will be. Mm-hmm. So just based on rationality, it can't be higher than 66. Nope. Because if everybody said 100, it would be 66. And so but invariably somebody is not going to realize that rationally. And actually, if you work this out rationally to its conclusion, everybody should say 1. Because, you work it down and work it down and work it down, because if it can't be higher than 66, then what's 2/3 of 66? And you come to, and so anyway, but it's this idea of rationality. And I know you are one of the most rational people that I've met, one of the most rational Dynasty players that I've met. And I guess my first jump in to picking your brain, to this Edge Finder series, to John Bosch, who looks at value totally different than 95% of the community, is, with your rationality, how do you approach the fantasy community that's not rational?
I mean, a lot of it is because legitimately I love game theory. So you said that people don't realize that they practice game theory and everything that they do. I do realize it. But I love it. Like, I mean, that's how my thought process is in literally everything. I mean, I'm not joking. I've played cornhole with a friend a few weeks ago, and we played for like 4 hours, and we literally talked about the strategy of cornhole the entire time. We were talking, and this guy he's very good too. Like, we play he's one of the people that we're both pretty good players because we understand the angles and where to throw the bags. And it's not always just try to throw it directly in the hole, which seems counterintuitive, but sometimes that's not the right move. So it's just like, that's a stupid game. I mean, fantasy football is a stupid game too, but it's to me, it's fun because of the strategy behind it. And I mean, I grew up playing board games. I play board games as much as I can. Like I would rather spend time at a party playing a board game with people to socialize or playing cards. I mean, it's just that's how I was brought up. And so obviously once I found kind of the Dynasty community and I was like, okay, these people play a little bit harder than, my casual redraft leagues. I'm going to get a little bit more into this. And I found other people that played. I don't play fantasy football because I like football. I mean, I don't care anymore. I really don't care about football anymore. But I play it because the game I love is fantasy football because I play it like a board game. I play it like a strategy game. And that's, to me, I think that's where I get my edge. I'm never going to study film. I listen to Zach because he loves to do that kind of stuff. I'm never going to crunch numbers. I just don't feel like doing that. I'll listen to Peter. Like there's so many people out there that do that. So I don't have to do that. I can still get the benefit of those facets of fantasy football. But the way I play it is just by treating it like a big board game. So that's how I approach it. And you're right. There are a lot of people that don't approach it that way. And a lot of people that think I'm just a little off because of the way I approach it sometimes. But I mean, you have to do something a little bit different in a lot of these leagues. Once you start playing, against you and against a bunch of other people like you that really do put in a bunch of time, you have to find ways to find an edge. So that is how I approach it. Is I try to play fantasy football like a board game. That's that's the best advice I can give to somebody. If that doesn't make sense to you, like it's more, if thinking the football is the more important part of fantasy football, then stay tuned. Maybe I'll be able to convince you over the next hour. But if you're like dead set in that mindset that fantasy football isn't like a board game and it's more like football, I'm probably not the person you're going to want to listen to because to me, it's so much not about football and it's so much more about a board game.
But it's funny you say, people think that your approach is a little off, but that little off gives such an edge because if you're attacking things that no one else is, and that's exactly why, John, why I wanted to bring you on and talk because I see it. Like I've watched you play. I've watched you attack. I listened to, you talk on pods. In fact, your podcast way back where we're talking Empire FFL, where we're like way back was one of the first podcasts that really got me into fantasy football. And
nice.
Full credit where credit is due. I mean, you were the impetus behind getting Kyle and I nudging us off the ledge in a DM with it was a Dynasty Nerds mock draft. And we were just kind of, well, should we do this? And what do we need to do? And you were like, yes, I want more podcasts to listen to. I think that was the real push that for you, the driving force, but it was that that approach. And I've heard you say something that I don't know that I've heard anybody else say, and you said it repeatedly.
No players matter.
Players don't matter. And it's such a fascinating angle that you approach from. And why don't players matter? I want to know why. I mean, I know why, but I want to know why.
They don't. I mean, they do, because eventually they're what score you your points, but players don't matter as much as what does it take to get that player. Some people focus really, really hard on the players, which again, they do play a role eventually, but you can you can figure out the end game of the puzzle however you want. You can find different pieces to put it together. It's not a one size fits all. Like, there are different ways to build it. I love watching people debate like running backs don't matter, so go zero RB, or like go robust running back. And I'm like, you could do like that. Sometimes you could do this. Sometimes you mix and match. I mean, there's just the players individually do not matter. Just because you have Patrick Mahomes does not mean you're going to win if you screw up everything else. So, I mean, there's the more important thing to me is, what does it take to put this player on my roster? Should I sacrifice, 2 starting positions in order to be able to put Mahomes as my QB1 in a super flex? Like, am I okay starting somebody terrible at my second flex or something like that? It might be worth it. And if you do the math, like, Mahomes scores this much, the player I can get a guy that'll score this much and it'll balance out versus getting a crummy quarterback later. Or you can play like, well, I've got studs everywhere else, so I can just slot in Eli Manning and Flacco. Like, they're good enough. They'll get me by, and they didn't cost me anything. So to me, I can put the puzzle together in a bunch of different ways. That's why the players don't matter. I can always try to come out winning because no individual players matters. Obviously, once the scoring starts happening, yes, you have to have players score points, but you can't control any of that. Right. You don't have any control over the actual amount of points they score. They can get injured. They can get in the coach's doghouse. They can get suspended. They can just not be involved in the game plan. The defense they're playing can shut them down. I can't control that at all. So I don't even bother to try to. I mean, I can try and target guys that, maybe aren't injured as often. Maybe they're in an offensive system that favors them. That all can change really fast, really fast. So since I have no control over that, all I can control is, what does it take for me to put certain players on my roster?
So what I'm hearing is Kyle Pitts doesn't matter. That's what I got out of that entire thing.
So obviously he's the only one that matters. No, I mean, he doesn't. He doesn't matter any more than anybody else. If you can get Waller, I would want Waller. If he's cheaper. If you can get Kelsey, I would want Kelsey. Right now, I'm pretty sure. I really do think Kyle Pitts is going to be the most expensive non-quarterback next year. Like, I think he's going to surpass Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor. I think we are going to see a world where a tight end is the most valuable asset in Dynasty.
Yeah,
so you should not be investing in him at that cost right now. But I'm okay to invest a lot in him because I think he's going to go up.
Well, and we talked about that back, I don't know, probably 2 months ago when the whole Pitts hype train started. And I said, I didn't want to admit this, but spending the 101 or 102 in a rookie draft or whatever it is, the equivalent in an auction, if that's what you do, like, that is going to be cheaper. That is going to be getting in on the ground floor if he ends up, and even if not, like, you're still going to recoup that value anyway. Like,
he's not going down. He's not going down. I know there's a theory out there that rookie tight ends are always cheaper after their rookie year. I completely disagree, and I don't even think facts show that. So
no, it's usually a couple years after, and then you're taking swings on guys that still have that athletic upside. But it is like Kyle Pitts. The profile of Pitts is totally different than anybody we have seen. And that's another thing that I love about the way that you approach this game is the value of players is what matters to you. It's the basis of Dynasty Wall Street. It like that to me. And I just had a conversation, and I don't know if you caught it, but I piggybacked. I quote tweeted a conversation that was going back and forth between Izzy Alcafaz of DTC and Tyler Gunther of DHH. And I said, this was really great because they were both on opposite sides, and it was a Jamar Chase conversation. And Izzy said something to the effect of, Chase, right now his value is such that I don't mind trading him and not worrying about whether or not he succeeds. Mm-hmm. Tyler's on the other side playing with his heart, going, he was so invested in Chase, and so I jumped in and I said, look, to me, rationally, if you can get the value for Chase that I think you can right now, if you can trade Chase for somebody in that Keenan Allen Robinson range, plus a piece, which I
Mhm.
think it's pretty close, then you avoid any worry about whether or not he falls on his face. You gain the piece where if Jamar Chase hits exactly what you're hoping, he is one of those two guys. So yeah, you're giving up years, but you have an almost, I mean, nothing's a guarantee, but an almost guarantee that. And so I was like, and I love Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase was my second highest graded receiver in this class. He's the sixth highest graded receiver I've had since 2015. Like, he's a very good player, but the game theory says you can have an optimal outcome without the risk. And so that, like, that really to me plays into a lot of how you approach things. And so in season, I know we're still preseason, but in season,
No. We are in season now. You can't call this part of the year. We are in season. I mean, if you're not in full-fledged dynasty mode at this point of your year, you are behind. You should be in season by now, folks.
This is Marquez Callaway season right now.
Yeah.
He just had a catch, and he'll be the flavor of the week. But so
he was already the flavor of the week. He's been there.
I picked him up. It was funny in my home league. I messaged Kyle because he didn't have the settings right, and so we had like a first come first serve waiver before our rookie draft, and it shouldn't have been open. And I said, I just want you to know that I am doing the honorable thing by not adding Callaway now, but as soon as the rookie draft is over and waivers open up, he's on my team. And he just like shook his head and he was like, you can have him. And I think that's going to be a win. But in season, how do you approach this? Again, it's Wall Street. How do you approach in season player values and approaching either trade partners or building a roster in season?
I'm all over the place in season. I will fully admit I do not have a set plan that I follow because I am in a bunch of different leagues. I have different teams in different areas, different teams doing different things. So I don't have a plan for my overall in-season dynasty strategy. My plan is look at my team and be honest with myself. And if I can't be honest with myself, I'll straight up ask somebody like, hey, like, look at my roster. Like, I'm kind of in the middle of the pack. Like, do you think it actually has a chance? Like, what would it take for me to get there? What's the more likely outcome? If I can't be honest with myself, I've gotten to the point now where you can kind of tell after you've played a little while, you can tell if a team's got it or doesn't. And I only want to win. Like, I don't want second place. I don't want third place. Even in leagues that pay, like, I either want to win or I want last. It's real easy for me. I don't try to play anywhere for the middle anymore. So in season, I mean, that's the biggest thing I do is I try to give an honest reflection to myself of what I think of that team. Now, if it's a contender, I will be aggressive as hell. If I think I have a shot to win, I don't care what I give up. There's a lot of people that say, well, you can't give up youth because you're just ruining your dynasty team for the next, 5 years. Well, I basically play in a 1-year window when it's in season and it's a competing team. If it's not a competing team, sure. Then I'm looking probably at like a 2 or 3 year window. Anybody who plays anything beyond that in dynasty, I don't think they've paid attention to what actually happens with their rosters. If you haven't, if you think that you play in a 4 or 5 year, 6 year window, something like that, be honest with yourself and go back and look at your team. Just pull up your roster from, last year, pull up your roster from the year before. The percentage of players that change over, even good players, like you have a guy who's a lock. He's going to be on my roster, never getting rid of him. He's probably gone. I mean, if you're active, whether it be trading, waivers, rookie drafts, and auctions, bringing in new players and having to get rid of players, the changeover is a lot bigger than a lot of people think. Even if you're playing in deep, deep leagues, the rosters just change over. So I try to treat it that way. If I am contending, Dynasty becomes a redraft to me. I will give up just about anything to win, because that's what I want more than anything. I want to win. People know it, so they'll take advantage of me and they'll ask for youth. And I don't care. I'll give me an old guy that's scoring way more. If I have a guy that gets hurt, yeah, it's open season. You're definitely, if it's a running back, holy crap, you're definitely getting a massive injury discount. Saquon went down last year, and I couldn't get rid of him fast enough in leagues. Now I've added him back this offseason in a couple of spots because I'm fine with it now. Like, he's going to be back, but he literally was doing nothing for me last year. He wasn't going to help me try to win any league, so I'm getting rid of him real fast, just as fast as I can. And then, I think I downgraded in a couple of places to, I think, like I targeted like the Jonathan Taylor. I think I even targeted like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I didn't care because I was winning at the time, and I know that one player can't make or break your lineup, but they can. I mean, when it's a guy like that, when it's a Saquon, when it's a top tier talent, yes, that that truly can make or break you winning a championship. So I'll ship them off real fast. Everybody knows it. So as soon as I have a running back that gets hurt, I mean, people definitely come to me to try and get that injury discount, which is fine. Because then if the entire league knows it, guess what? They're going to have to compete with each other. And then the market goes a little bit more in my favor because they all want the discount, so they don't get as much, I make it real apparent too, hey, Saquon's hurt. I'm still in this. I don't want to give up my season. Let's figure out a deal. So I move on quick. I try to adjust fast.
And I love that, because so many people get caught up in, and again, it's back to the players don't matter. So many people get caught up in, I can't get rid of Saquon, or I can't get rid of CMC, or I can't get rid, whoever it is. And that's great, but you just sunk your entire season if you don't. And I think you're absolutely spot on with even a 2 to 3 year window. Like, we like to think that we can predict what's going to happen, but even year to year, like I just saw a great tweet from Ben Gretsch that said something to the effect of that he's always amazed at the short memory of fantasy analysts and fantasy players, because every NFL season ever has gone differently than how we talk about the players. And it's absolutely right.
People are right like 50% of the time. Like, that's a good day.
Yeah, I was going to say, the best people at this are right 50 or 60% of the time. And schlubs like me, it's not even close to that. And sure. So we get so enamored with our own ability to be able to predict this. And it also makes me laugh with like the metrics community trying to like plug in numbers to accurately predict exactly what, and I'm like, I love you guys, but there's so many variables that you just can't. Like, you can come close, you can approximate. And I think that's what, like, when Peter does it, that's what I love about Peter, is like, he's not trying to predict, he's trying to say, well, this player is closest to these other players that I have, some length of, I don't even know what I want to say. Like, he
approaches it understanding that he's going to be wrong a lot, and does not approach it from the aspect of, well, this is the best way to play because I'm always right. He approaches it knowing I'm going to do the best I can, and it might be 50% right, but that might be better than 40%, and that's a huge edge.
Right. And he's comparing, he's saying this player is most like these players that we have a sample size. And so he's not saying this player will be these players, but there is a path to success. And like that sort of thing, I think that it gets so lost. I mean, it goes back to, I always say, anybody who tells you they know is trying to sell you something. Yep. Because none of us do. I mean, that goes back to why we call ourselves the Dynasty Dummies in the first place, because we fully embrace the fact that we don't know, and ask people who do, and ask. I mean, again, this is the Edge Finder series. It's ask people who do a certain facet of this game better and differently than everybody else, and get that insight, because that's super valuable. Now, how often are you checking like DLF ADP or Trade Finders, DTC, that sort of thing. Do you do that, or is it and no, like I see you making a face like
so I do one deal, like when Ryan tweets out new DLF ADP, I will go and like scan it because I am curious about it. But that's like, I'll look at it and I'll look to see like where I kind of disagree or agree. And then obviously if I'm making a game night out of it, that one of the reasons I not that I host ever again. Yes, Matt, Russ, one day I will host again. One of the best things about hosting is you have to come up with the games, and it kind of forced me to actually look at that. I don't really look at the trade calculator, but I have 2 podcasts where I'm kind of forced to look at the trade calculator. I don't judge any trade I made based on the calculator. Yeah. I don't care what the calculator says. I literally have 2 podcasts where I basically try to disagree with the calculator. That's the whole point of Dynasty Wall Street is we pull up values that we completely disagree with. But it's still a great tool. I'm not saying it's not a great tool. It does serve its purpose of being able to look at things and seeing if it's in the same ballpark. I don't check myself anymore. I used to, but now I feel okay in my values on how I value a player. Granted, people will tell me that's not crazy. It's nowhere close. And I'm like, okay, like that's fine. We don't agree. The trade's not going to happen. I don't care what evidence you present to me. You're not going to just like, I'm not going to be like, oh, okay, my mind's changed. Here's the player that you wanted that I also wanted, but now I don't want for some reason. So I don't check them like as frequently as you might think, but because I have set myself up to look at them, because it's a good check for me. That is what I do like about them, both of them, because it makes me look at where the community is, because they're very good tools at measuring where the community is. I use it because I like to find out where I'm very, very different. I don't really care where I'm the same as other people. I want to find out who do I value so differently than everybody else that I can go, we shouldn't make this a Kyle Pitts podcast because then I'll talk for 5 hours. But I mean, like Matt Price and I both absolutely love him. I mean, I think we're both on board that he would be our first pick in a dynasty startup if it's not a quarterback in a super flex. Like I would take him right now. It would probably be tough for me to take him above CMC, but I might. He and I both might. So we we co-manage a team together, and we were not eligible to draft in the rookie draft. It's a vampire league, so we don't get draft picks, stuff like that. But we wanted Kyle Pitts. We knew we wanted Kyle Pitts. As soon as he got drafted, we sent offers. Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, A.J. Brown. Pick the receiver that you want. We want Kyle Pitts. And they initially all got rejected, believe it or not. The guy had a change of heart and came back and he got Tyreek from us. If you go to ADP, if you go to the calculator, that trade's going to look terrible for us. We don't care. So I mean, that's great. It's because we disagree so much with the ADP and with the calculator that's what it allows us. It allowed us to make that trade without really giving more than we wanted to give. I don't know that we would have given more than Tyreek to get him, but right now that trade, sure, it doesn't look great. Next year at this time, which I think we're going to get production this year. I finally gave up on saying that wasn't going to happen. I really did not think I was going to feel as comfortable with Pitts as a tight end as a rookie as I would, but I do. Like I think it's just I don't see how he busts unless he's just terrible or he gets hurt. Even if he gets hurt, that just preserves his value. So he has to be on the field and terrible. I don't see how it can happen. I just don't see it. So I am all in on redraft on him now too. It's disgusting. But so I think we're still going to get plenty of production this year. And I think by next year, he's going to overtake Tyreek Hill in dynasty value. So, I mean, that's where I do kind of utilize ADP and calculators and stuff like that, because obviously Kyle Pitts versus Tyreek and ADP, it's a pretty big difference. And I believe it's a pretty big difference in trade calculators, trade analyzers, whatever you want to look at. It's a difference there too. But it's one where Matt and I think all the tools are wrong and we think we are right. Because we're right always up to 50% of the time, right? That's how it works. We're so good at this. Wait, hold on. That might not make sense. Shoot, did we screw up?
I love that though. Again, it's attacking the edges. It's attacking the places where if there is consensus and you are flying in the face of that, that's where you can make big gains. And there's something else that I love that you do in season. I don't know if you'll keep this up, but where you do the trade polls and yeah, and you'll throw a poll up, one player versus another player or player versus pick or whatever, and when the community chimes in and goes way one way, then all of a sudden here's John swooping in to attack.
All right, I'm making
trades like that. I love that.
So, I mean, that's for Dynasty Panic Room, which that is only in season. I think I've done like 2 or 3 off-season episodes just randomly because news will break or something. And you're right. I put up a big Twitter poll. I usually try to do it on an island game when everybody's sitting around, Sunday night, Monday night, they're just watching football. What do you do during the commercials? Everybody just looks at Twitter, scrolls Twitter, but you can tell. I mean, people just freak out. Everybody's watching the same thing. So like if a receiver has 2 drops, like all of a sudden his dynasty value also drops. It's nuts how people get caught up in the moment. I don't want to say overreact because maybe they're right. I think they're usually wrong, but I'm not going to tell them that. But I think people get caught up in the moment. So I do like to put out polls, and the one that I will never forget was Stephon Diggs. I think had a bad week on a Monday night game or something like that. And I tweeted out like, what's his current dynasty value? So it's usually would you take him? Would you trade him for 2 firsts, a first, a second? Like I give the options. And when the poll is split, fortunately, since I play in so many leagues, I tend to have a decent amount of every single player in the NFL. So if I completely support that the picks are where the value would be, then I'll take that player in every league that I have, and I'll make a trade offer to every team to try to get picks back. Now, if it's the player I want, then I just go and I'll offer the pick for it. And I mean, it's another thing that I do. Again, I do podcasts to force me to do things that I should do anyways, because it forces me to always be reevaluating my rosters. It forces me to make trade offers, which I know we all love trading, but making trade offers can become burdensome when you're in a bunch of leagues, and especially if it's a team that is kind of in the middle. Those are the ones you should be making the most trade offers in. It's really easy and exciting to make trades when you're going for the win or when you're going for the 101 and you're trying to stockpile picks. Those are really exciting situations. But the trade polls then help me because I'll do it in every league. Like I will literally try to send out 30 offers involving this player, whether I'm trying to get them or get rid of them. Like I want a huge sample size, and inevitably there are some offers that I wouldn't even have made because I would be like, that's a terrible offer. Nobody's going to take that. But inevitably it has got me some players at times, and I'm like, okay. I never would have thought that this trade poll was right, but sure enough, in this particular league, that was the guy's trade value, and I got the player for it, and I thought it was low. So that is always a fun tool as well.
And it goes to show you that you don't know, because people's value is all over the place. I mean, I'm in a league, my home league, where you've got a bunch of guys from the New England area, and I know that there is a Pats fan and a Jets fan in that league that will overvalue those players. And it's like that in every league, although not necessarily with specific teams, but there's going to be somebody in your league that has a completely different set of valuation than you do.
If you have a Bills fan or a Cowboys fan in your league, make note of those teams. Those fans like their players a lot.
They're hardcore. That's the nice thing about being a Pats fan is that there's nobody there to really, there's nobody to go after. So you're just like,
I guess Mac Jones, Ramondre Stevenson. Yeah. There's not a ton of fantasy value coming out of New England these days.
I mean,
John Yu. People want John Yu.
yeah.
You
Oh,
froze a little. Just a
am
heads
I
up.
back? Yeah,
You're not.
my internet
You're at like
may not
39 minutes, just so you know, if you go and cut this back. Write that time down.
Yep.
All right, you're back now. Now I can see you.
Am I back for real?
Nope. You were back for a second, but you're kind of going in and out, blurry and stuff. Like I can see your camera just almost disappear.
Oh, nice.
No, you're good. Now you're good. All right, let's keep going. Sorry.
Am I back?
Yep, you're good now.
All right.
Just like a little 1 minute spurt there.
Yeah, that's it does that. It is like, nah, I'm from Maine. I don't want to do the internet thing right now. The hamster decides he's tired and stops. So but yeah, like being a Pats fan is nice for fantasy because I don't care about Ramondre Stevenson. I don't care about I got suckered into Sony Michel for like but
hey,
yeah,
we've all been there.
Pour one out.
We've all been there.
Well, of course, he's going to end up like cut or traded to the Rams and is going to have a great season and everyone will be out on him. But there's another thing that you do that is very unique, John, to you, at least to my knowledge. And I'm sure that other people do this, but haven't been so open about it. It's one of my favorite tweets that you do, and you usually do it every year after the season, where you talk about your off-season process of gauging where you think players' values will be a year from now, which to me is, again, really, really interesting. And because most people are looking so short-term with value and trying to, and I'm guilty of that, where I play those micro markets and when guys drop, like Jamar Chase is in free fall, or when guys bump, I will sell. You're looking in the preseason at value for a year from now. And if you don't mind, I'd love to have you just take me through a little bit of that process.
Yeah, that is actually my biggest undertaking of like stuff that I do. Like that takes me actual time and effort. I don't do a lot of writing anymore, but that I do. I did start sharing. I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, I think I started sharing it. That I do it, and it's extremely helpful to me. It kind of provides me with a blueprint for my off-season plan. So basically, after the NFL season wraps up, the Super Bowl's done, we start talking about the rookies and stuff like that. I immediately want to start thinking, how is this guy going to play into my values? But not just for right now, because everybody does that. So like you said, I want to try to predict how I'm going to value a guy a year from now. So I will put it out. It's just a simple Google sheet. Sometimes I'll do a little write-up on position groups or within tiers or something like that if there's something that makes me want to talk about a player. Usually now I just go somewhere and I talk about it and somebody can listen. So that's easier than writing. But I really want to lock in where I think a guy will be a year from now, because what it does is it opens up trading possibilities for me, because what I really do is I look within the tiers then, and I look for one guy that's on the ascent and a guy that's on the descent. And if I can flip within a tier and change out a guy that, okay, so I like both these guys right now, but I think next year I'm going to like this guy more and this guy less. And I think the production's going to be about the same. I think everything's going to be about the same for their current year. But I think next year at this time, one of them is going to have more dynasty value. That's really why I do it, is because it just makes it real easy for me then to go and look at, trades. I want to make trades where I'm always trying to make my roster better for the future. Even though I play in a pretty short window, I still want my roster to be better in the future without really sacrificing a lot of production. And I mean, that's a big, like we talked about the Pitts for Tyreek Hill trade. That's kind of the impetus of that. Like, yes, right now that looks bad for us. I think a year from now, it's going to look really damn good for us. And I think we're going to be okay this year, like no matter what happens. So I do it then. I don't update it at all until the draft because the draft matters a ton. I'm a big proponent of draft stock because guess what? I don't know what the NFL thinks of players. I don't know what a coach thinks of a player. I have no control over a coach putting a player on the field. But guess who does? The NFL teams. They tell us a lot in free agency. They tell us a lot in the draft. They put their investment in a guy. That's going to bump him. If they have invested in that stock is rising for me. It's real easy. You know, if they draft a running back in the first round, that's going to get my attention. If they draft a tight end with the 4th overall pick, that's going to get my attention. Granted, I loved him like immediately, but like I'm pretty sure after the draft, he went all the way from my number 2 tight end to my number 1 tight end. So like it took all the way to the draft before I went really off the rails with him. You know, but so that's kind of how I do it. I honestly, I have been thinking in the last couple of days, like I kind of want to go back and do an update because I know there's guys that I've changed my thoughts on. I mean, we're getting a lot more information right now. We are getting training camp information. We're seeing who's getting, you know, I don't like to overreact to training camp reports, but you can't underreact to them either. If a guy's having a good camp, he's having a good camp. Like you can't just ignore it. You can't, take lock is the worst thing in fantasy football for me. I could say one thing tonight, and then if I could change my opinion tomorrow, guess what? Does that make me a flip-flopper? I don't care. I just want to adjust and have the best possible outcomes for me. I don't understand people that don't make adjustments and they just continue to rely on what their evaluation said, you know, a month ago, 3 months ago, a year ago. Like, well, I really liked this film coming out. Well, a lot has changed since then for even the NFL rookies right now. Like stuff has changed. You can't discard it all. You have to keep it in the back of your mind, but like you have to adjust constantly. So there's a little part of me that thinks I really like, I'm feeling that pull to go and do an adjustment right now. I probably just need to go and look at it and just be like, ooh, that one looks really bad. That was a mistake, but I do. And then at the end of the year, I do I go back and I look. So like in 2022, after the NFL season, I'll actually start my process by looking at the sheet that I made this year. Because I want to know, like, where was I way off? Where was I right? Where was I wrong? What caused me to be wrong? What helped me to be right? You know, I want to make sure I'm constantly refining that process. I do think it is a good tool. And I've had a lot of people say they appreciate that post.
Yeah, it's fantastic as a gauge on where you're at, but also as kind of a template. Like I started doing a very similar thing because I was like, man, that's a brilliant idea, because not only do you get this, and I love what you said about the ascending and descending players within a tier. I think that is a fantastic way to attack trading and you know, evaluating who you want to go after in a trade. But the other part of that is, for me, that I'm able to, again, like you said, assess my process and see where I'm right and where I'm wrong and why. And that reevaluation, and that's come up. I mean, it's come up with Peter, it's come up with Russ, it's come up with J Mike, now it's come up with you. That ability to refine your process based on new information. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest takeaways for me throughout talking to all of you, is you've got to be willing to admit you're wrong and change when new information comes up. It was funny you mentioned that you think take lock is the worst thing possible, because I had one other question that was specific to this, and it was a question that you had put out as a poll, and it was, what is the most dangerous long-term to long-term dynasty success, overreaction or take lock? And it was 950 responses, and the poll went 50-50.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a perfect example, because if you have to choose between one of them, you shouldn't choose either of them.
Yeah.
They're both the wrong answer, but they're also both the right answer. So it's like you can't overreact, you can't underreact. You have to react perfectly every single time. That's kind of hard to do. So I remember that poll. I do remember putting that out. And I think that was I think there was something going on around Twitter at that time, and people were, well, I think somebody was getting kind of ripped for changing their opinion on somebody. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, if somebody doesn't change their opinion, you would get ripped for take lock, as you should. But if you literally change your opinion at the drop of a hat with no reason, then I can kind of see it. But there's an in between. You have to find the balance, and you have to be right, which is very hard to do. So just try to be right more than you're wrong. Best way to do that is just trade a lot. Trade a lot. You want to know how to come out ahead in trades? Trade 100 times. Maybe you win 55 out of 45 of them. And that's probably a really good rate. If you trade 5 times, then you really better have a high hit rate, or, one or two of them could be the one that tanks your team for a long time. So trade a lot. It makes your percentage, it's going to help you. Just volume is what matters for running back. Volume is what matters for trading.
I like it. Now, probably the most impressive edge that you have that I've witnessed is inventing new either auction or salary cap or just dynasty leagues with wrinkles that just bury your competition, because to unpack the things that you have done sometimes, I know that having been in your leagues, there are just so many layers, and it's great. It's so much fun, because all of a sudden it's a little bit like what Scott Fish does with the Scott Fish Bowl, although he does it on a micro level where he's changing like a few of the rules and making you think outside the box. Your leagues, there is no box. Yeah. And I love that. So now that I've got you, I want to talk a little bit about auction, because your leagues are all auction, and so what is the most important thing to you to keep in mind when you're headed into an auction? I don't know if you approach startups differently than rookie drafts.
Oh, very, very. Startups are a completely different animal. So we can start with those. Startups, everybody has the same budget. You start with the same budget. You can trade if the auction is set up correctly. You can trade, and you should be able to trade for startup budget. If you're in an auction and your commissioner says you can't trade startup budget, tell them yes you can, and tell them to tweet me. I'll show them the setting, because you should definitely be able to do it. Just like in a draft, how you can trade to move up rounds and stuff. That's the same thing as your auction budget. Acquire more weaponry. So in an auction, in a startup, the biggest thing is stocking the board. Yes, it is something you have to do. When I have an auction going, I have it up on my phone. I don't close out the window. It just sits there. All I do is click on it and hit refresh, and then I look at it. A lot. A lot. I honestly can't even tell you how frequently. I definitely don't go more than an hour without looking at the board. Because what it does is we don't want to call it betting, because fantasy football is not betting, but you find tendencies, we will call them, not betting tendencies, or patterns. Definitely not betting tendencies or patterns. We'll call them bidding. There we go. Bidding tendencies and patterns. If you follow the board enough during a startup, you see what other people are doing, and timing is very important in auctions. And I don't mean, I bid at 6 p.m. so that the player goes off at 6 a.m. when everybody's asleep. Yeah, that can be a factor. That definitely can be a factor, but that's not what I mean by timing. Timing is watching the board develop and looking for the windows where you can make a bid and other people can't do anything about it. You want to set it so that your players are going to go off the board when other people have money tied up and they can't outbid you. It is tough to do. But as you do an auction, as you do a bunch of auctions, if you really start paying attention to the boards, and this is startups because rookies are rookie ones, we'll get to that. That's a little different. But in a startup, it is really about timing of your bids. Again, a lot of people think the amount of the bid is what is most important. It's not. It is the timing of the bid. It is when you make a bid in relation to when everybody else can outbid you. And when you really start to watch it, eventually what will happen is you'll be able to predict what will happen after you make a bid. So if I'm looking at a board, I can tell, like, okay, if I bid on Christian McCaffrey, I'm pretty sure the manager that I'm outbidding is then going to bid on Saquon Barkley. And then that manager is going to bid on Alvin Kamara. And then that manager is going to bid on Dalvin Cook. Like, you can watch, if you can watch how you think the dominoes are going to fall. Doesn't always go that way. But if you kind of run yourself through that process every single time you make a bid, which is a lot, but this is where the game theory comes in. I mean, this is where it's a board game, because you're not just, the players don't matter. You're predicting the moves that the players in your league, those are the players that matter, not the NFL players. The fantasy football players matter. You're trying to you start to try to predict what they're going to do. When you're right, then you really start to get their bidding tendencies and stuff down. And when you can start to make bids that cause reactions that you predict correctly, then you really get to run an auction board. I can't describe that feeling when you get it, but when you have that control over a board, it's hard for people to really do a lot against you. And I mean, even if they know it's happening, there's times where you can just make it so the math doesn't allow them to prevent you from doing it. There are plenty of times where I've been blocked by that too, and I'm like, I can't bid Kevin up. I need somebody else, so I'll go in the chat and make sure somebody else does it. Because you should obviously be able to table talk, because that's how everybody gets sharper in an auction, is by learning through other people telling them things like patterns and, hey, if you don't bid him up now, this guy's getting through. Plus, if you bid him up, he's probably going to go up and bid all these other people. So you walk people through, definitely table talk. It is fun. So rookie auctions, completely different because the budgets are not the same. If you want to run a rookie auction, you have to have more money than other people. You can't run an auction just with timing in such a small pool of players. Like, it's a smaller pool of players, so it's harder. It's harder to control it. But if you have the hammer of the money, nobody should be able to stop you. I tweeted out about Kevin Cotillo doing it to me in an auction that we were in together. Like, he had the most money, I had the second most money, and there was very little I could actually do to stop him. I banked on him actually letting me get like a player or two so that he would then have complete control, and he did. He let me get Pitts and Travis Etienne. So that was awesome. But then I was out of the auction. Like, I was out. But I knew my move there was like, okay, he's not going to want me to battle him on every single player, because that's eventually just going to make his costs all be more, and he's going to get less players. So he's going to sacrifice a couple of people. So I just bid them up to a relatively high price, got him through. Then I was kind of out of the auction, which he was fine with. Like, he wanted me out, and I knew he wanted me out. But again, that's knowing the person you're auctioning against. In a rookie auction, it is very tough to have a lot of control if you don't have the money. If everybody has, nearly the same amounts, somehow they shouldn't, because bad teams should not have the same amount. They should definitely have enough to clear the auction board. But if you have the same amounts, then it does kind of go back to a little bit more like a startup, where the things like the timing become more important. But for a rookie auction, if you want to control it, it's about what you do leading up to that auction and acquiring as much bidding money as possible. And then you can just run the board.
Yeah. So if you're in an auction or in any of like Pigs leagues or John's leagues, pay attention to this, because this is like, I've been on the other end of that. I've watched John control the board. I've watched Kevin come in and clean up in rookie drafts. Like, and I kind of understood what was happening. but not nearly enough. There, I haven't had the experience, and apparently just wasn't looking at things the right way. But man, it's a frustrating thing, but also a beautiful thing with an auction, because you can get any player that, in theory, any player that you want, if you want him bad enough, if you want to pay, and so.
And if you use the timing right, you can prevent other people from getting who they want. And that's just, I mean, Kevin now totally is on board that an auction is a board game. Like, yeah. I mean, we've auctioned together enough. We co-manage teams and stuff enough. And we've had massive conversations about this. And I mean, if you're playing like chess or something like that, you're not just playing for that one move. You're, one bid. You're not playing like, okay, I'm not going to call it a chess move because I can't remember any of them. But that's the example, like when you move one piece, you should not have just moved that one piece based on that moving that one piece. It should be because you think your opponent is then going to do this, and then you're going to do that, and then your opponent's going to do that. You should be thinking that through in every auction bid. It's a lot. It is a lot. But after you do it a while, you do it's second nature. Like, I mean, I don't force myself to think it and try and go through a process with every bid. At this point now, I stare at the boards enough. You start to memorize them, honestly. And if you just never stop thinking about them, you kind of start to figure out what moves will happen.
It's the cascade, and
the cascade. That is what it is. And it's so fun to watch because it just goes plink, 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 plink. It always happens still.
It is. And like Russ Fisher talked about that with trades and how he's thinking, 3 or 4 or 5 trades ahead. And it's that same thing. I think that mindset of being able to understand what is probably going to happen and be able to drive that action is such an advantage.
It's huge. And there is always a best move too. Like in drafts, there's not always the best move because you just take, that's your player. You take one and then it goes to the next pick. It doesn't create that cascading effect as much. I mean, obviously, like if you take somebody that nobody was expecting, there's a little bit of a ripple. A little bit of a ripple. If you do something in an auction, every move you make creates this huge ripple effect. And it's just, it's awesome. And there's always an optimal move, like you talked about. There's always something you can do that is the best move. Kevin and I talk, I'm not kidding, when we have auctions going on, we talk about our maneuvers, even if we're going against each other, because it sharpens us. Like anytime I have literally in auctions said, Kevin, this is what I think you're going to do. And I do it a little bit to try and psych him out. Honestly, there is definitely some of that to it. Like I will lay out, Kevin, I think these are your next moves because you want this to happen, this to happen, this to happen, this to happen. Maybe I'm giving him a full game plan. I don't think I am because he knows what he's doing now. But I also try to, I want to just mess with his head a little bit because a lot of times he's like, yes, that's exactly what I was going to do. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I know. But that also gives me a good read on him because then if he does it, and it's fun to go back and forth. But it like having a conversation with somebody during an auction that you're going against that you trust, and that, I mean, I won't say we're 100% open with each other. I definitely know when he's trying to play me to make a bid, and he definitely knows when he straight up tells me I can't tell if you're being honest with me or just trying to manipulate me into making a bid. And usually I tell him I am trying to manipulate you into making a bid, but it's still the right move. And here's why. Like, I'm never going to try and convince you about a trade. You're never going to change on that. Me and you will talk game strategy, and I will try to convince you why doing the move I think you should make is the right move. Sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he can convince me to do things in there. I mean, you can see a different perspective. You can't always see every angle during an auction. But if you think there's only one angle and it's just literally the price of the players on the board, if you think that's the only angle, you are missing a ton in an auction. And I mean, you'll see people that go in with a ton of money, but don't understand those angles and don't play it like it's a board game. They don't play it that way. And they mess up the auctions. And it's like, oof, how did you come out with just that little bit with all that you went into?
it's like being the chip leader at the table playing
Yes,
poker and
it's
not being the bully. Like
Yes.
you've got to come in and be
You
the
have
bully.
to.
It's
And that's where I kind of came from before I started playing fantasy football at an obsessive level. I played a lot of online poker. So like, I mean, because there's game strategy and again, I would never analyze any kind of poker or anything like that because it was big time elite, whatever. It's not legal in Kentucky, whatever. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, there were if you paid attention, you saw betting patterns, you saw habits, and it's the same thing in an auction. Like they correlate so much to each other, and that's why. I mean, I loved poker. I still love poker, and that's why I get my thrill in auctions. Once they took poker away from me.
Yeah, so you and I were probably never in an online poker room together at any point. Like that probably never happened because I didn't
would
play
be
either.
Amazing if we were. Let's see. I was on Poker Room. I think I was on Bet US. Poker Stars, I think.
Yeah, when I was in college, it was pretty much everything. Like all of them.
I quit my job and just started playing online poker. Like I'm not kidding. Like I made more money playing poker than I did working.
Yeah.
So that was a good time. And then a terrible, terrible, terrible dark day.
Yeah. It wasn't so good. John, this has been so much fun. I really appreciate you coming on and doing this. It like listening to you talk about game theory and like, again, me having just gone through, Yale's Econ 159 with game theory and like, you talk about optimal strategy and that's Nash's equilibrium to a T. Like you're always trying to figure out what is the best way to attack things and the best way without giving up an advantage. But like I said, this has been awesome. I have taken copious notes and I hope that the people listening have. Is there anything on the way out that you want to plug? I know you've got a bunch of shows, a bunch of leagues, the Eliminators, the floor is yours.
Yeah, you can just follow me on Twitter. I'm at John Bosch FF. If anybody doesn't follow me on there. You'll see anything that I ever put out. Anytime I do a show, I retweet it and send it out. Luckily, I have some other folks that they're willing to put in the work, Kevin and Bob, so I don't have to edit anymore. Occasionally, and Russ does the editing on Dynasty Game Night. It's almost like that's the part that I hate. So I will get on there and I will talk about plenty of fantasy football options. And I've been blessed that other people enjoy the editing part of it and that the production part of it. So that's great. You'll see me on Twitter. That's where I'll put stuff out. Yeah, the Eliminators, they'll be back. That's a long time away, so I'm not thinking about that right now. Right now, I'm thinking, what do I have to do for the rest of August before all my leagues kick off in September? And I actually kind of can't wait for leagues to kick off because when the season starts, like my work is kind of done. I don't have to be a commissioner really at that point. Like leagues kind of run themselves. Hopefully, there's no issues, and that's when I get to be more of a manager. It is tougher to balance with all the leagues I commission now. I find myself spending more time commissioning than managing, but that's okay. I love both sides of it. So
I would say, and the fantasy football space is better off that you do commission and like you're kind of, I always say you're that evil genius, that mad scientist of leagues, but it adds so much flavor and you find things that you never even knew that you loved by joining your leagues and there are a couple of, Scott Fish and Ryan McDowell obviously are the two other guys that I'd throw in that category, but
no, they're definitely tiers above, but I appreciate you even trying to lump me in.
No, I really like when I think commissioners, you three are the triumvirate that definitely comes to mind. If you're following me and not following John, like I don't know what you're doing. Follow John at John Bosch FF on Twitter. If you are not following the DFPN network, all the guys at the network, you should be. We got some fantastic, Sal Lito, Kevin Cotillo, Stephen Marcus.
We have there's fantastic guys and those guys. Good point.
Yeah, those guys too.
There's some fantastic guys there and those guys. That's a great point.
Joe at FF Trader Joe is the man behind everything. So again, I always say this, but it's always true. If you see me tweet something that's remotely intelligent or funny, it's probably Joe. Definitely with the handles, the DFPN network handle and the Dynasty Dummies, it is most definitely Joe. And you should be following him. J Mike, Kyle, Matt Foreman, Russ Fisher. I mean, it is just a great bunch of people and people willing to talk to you on Twitter about fantasy football, but about more than that, which is really what I love about the network. And you could follow me at Tacit Assassin 13. I don't know why you would want to, but I'm here.
I recommend following Zach.
I
Especially if you're listening to this podcast. Like, why would you listen to this and not be following Zach?
I suppose that's true. I occasionally tweet out.
That's weird, you creepers. Definitely just follow him.
Humorous memes of Daniel Jones and the Michael Jordan and Aaron Rodgers. But so I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you taking the time. You'll be better off for listening to John talk about his strategy. But this has been the Dynasty Dummies. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for having me, Zach.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.